afternoon. This is Debra B. Wilson. I am in West Yorkshire. It's Saturday, the 27th of October, 2018, and the time is 1200 hours and 49 minutes, and that's GMT. Today I'm going to do a podcast about the Counter-Extremism Commission headed by Sarah Khan. On the 24th of October of this year, the Home Affairs Select Committee had a meeting, with the subject being counterterrorism. Two people spoke, gave evidence. One was the Assistant Commissioner of Specialist Operations, Neil Basu. He's the most senior counterterrorism police person. He's management, and he oversees the counterterrorism policing effort out of the Metropolitan Police. And then the second witness was Sarah Khan, and Sarah Khan is the commissioner for the Counter-Extremism Commission. I have a video which I've uploaded from Parliament UK, their website, of the entire event, testimony from the two people, and then now I have a video of just Sarah Khan, because the portion that I want to focus on in this podcast relates to the work of Sarah Khan's commission, at least how I see the commission, and I hope the commission to be. I will include links to the commission's website and Twitter account as well. As I mentioned before, I have for many years engaged in activism that looked at extremism in the UK. In the way in which I looked at it was through a gendered lens, and it was out of a feminist organization. For many years, that's specifically how I described myself. Recently, I became aware of Sarah Khan's self-description, one of her self-descriptions, which is she was a counter-extremism activist. And I thought that was apropos for my own work, and I am indeed adopting that, and will use that term throughout this very brief podcast. When I listened to the testimony of Sarah Khan about the Counter-Extremism Commission, I was enthusiastic, with caution. That's because I'm just always very cautious person. That's the auditing background. Always cautious. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. So with that in mind, I'm going to briefly give my opinion of what I hope the direction of the commission will be. I think it goes without saying, and if you look at the entire day's event with Mr. Basu's testimony included, which again I have posted that, he talks about the unprecedented threat level that the UK is now experiencing. His agency is one of the agencies that has to deal with that. With that in mind, I thought the two people, Mr. Basu and Ms. Khan, were perfect. They're both state actors. Mr. Basu's function is a state function. He oversees a state function. The way I see Sarah Khan's function, she is a state actor, but she is looking at the responses of civil society. The same could be said about Mr. Basu. Sarah Khan's remit, the way I understand it, is to understand how civilians, from a civil society perspective, regular civilians, and academics experience and understand extremism. I think Sarah Khan's role, the role of her commission, is pivotal. Special Branch SO15 counterterrorism people do their own research do their own, it's called intelligence gathering, as does MI5. But the role that I think that Sarah Kahn's commission can play is to, number one, give a place and a space for civilians to communicate their research and civil society actions, activism, to the state. I also think it's a place in which the commission can participate in the work of helping to ensure that the state understands what those responses, the actions coming from academia, citizens, and organically emerging civil societies, activism. Those responses, particularly from civil society, can act as a diagnostic tool, can be yet another diagnostic tool of the resilience of civilians, of the stresses, of the concerns. I think the potential and the directions that the commission can go in to facilitate the state's understanding are tremendous. In my mind, I think the commission can continue to educate the state functions, the internal functions such as the counter-terrorism policing efforts and the internal spying efforts, to nuance civil society. The threat level here is quite vigorous and aggressive. I argue from a civil society perspective, in some respects, civil society has responded in kind. The threat level is unprecedentedly aggressive, and so has civil society been in some cases. Loud, angry, persistent. Some of that, all of it can be used as a diagnostic tool of what needs to be addressed from a threat level and what needs to be addressed in terms of assisting civilians with their management of their fears and concerns about their safety. I also think it can be a tool for the commission to educate the state security apparatuses of a clear vision of what is a threat in terms of all activism. It can be viewed as a response, organically emerging activism. If it's organically emerging from civilians, from the citizens, it can be used as a diagnostic tool, whether it's friendly, quote unquote, and benign, or whether it's aggressive and bad, quote unquote, and needs intervention from, say, the police, or if it's somewhere in the middle. Which brings me to my next point. I hope the commission finds a way to engage with healthy activism that seeks to assist in addressing what is harming the state, what ills the state, the nation, this country. But I also, and how you go about doing that is complicated, but I also hope that the commission will have an open ear to more aggressive, often not pleasant forms of civil society expression, because they also that can also teach and inform and educate. I think that Ms. Kahn's commission has the potential to not only understand, but to engage with civilians, citizens, residents, those of us that live here in the UK, and those of us that give voice, literally or metaphorically, to how we're experiencing extremism. I think there's a chance and an opportunity, and a tremendous opportunity for the Commission to understand that and communicate to the state, what that looks like, how civilians are understanding what's happening here. I think it gives additional tools for the state to nuance their responses to extremism, and those responses, in being nuanced, are less injurious to the healthy parts of society and are measured in their responses. It can also, the Commission can also educate the state through its emergence on issues that are developing and yet, quote unquote, yet unseen by the state. So I think the Commission has a tremendous opportunity to be an effective space of education and guidance and facilitation. There's a call for evidence, for proposals. Again, I'm going to link all this in the podcast, that the state, the Commission anticipates doing in the not too distant future. I hope far and wide. There's a call out far and wide. I hope organizations that are viewed as friendly will come forward. I hope those that have less than, dare I say, politically correct utterances will come forward, because they're a part of this society and they're a part of what makes up the whole. I hope the Commission takes an analytical, panoramic view of understanding the parts and pieces that make up the whole in terms of responding to extremism. Again, I will say again, I will link all the appropriate information in the description box of this podcast. Take a listen to Sarah Khan. Come up with your own conclusions. If you have a proposal and a suggestion, send it to her. When the call is put out there and you have an organization or a group of citizens, I'll let her speak for herself, but I'm hoping the response is far and wide. This is Debra V. Wilson, and I'm in West Yorkshire. Thank you.